Welcome to the Small Giants Fishbowl. Today's topic is employees, something, and engagement. It's pretty easy to tell that something is missing from this title. It's not so easy to tell what's missing in your company when you see employee engagement drop and the quality of work start to slide. This Fishbowl is led by R. Michael Rose, author of Return on Energy and CEO of Mojo Media Labs. Rose will lead members through a practical discussion and examination of how to identify where the energy is missing inside of specific elements of their workplaces. Okay, here we go.
Well, good. It's good to see some of you guys, all of you guys, but for the most part, I see some of you again. I'm really excited to share this with you. I know I have about 10 minutes, which I will pay close attention to. I usually do this in anywhere from 90 minutes to 8 hours. So I'll do my best to get through the highlights as quickly as possible. I'm having evidently some connectivity issues here. I'm getting some repeat issues. But what does this saying mean to you guys? People only see what they're prepared to see. And it's a rhetorical question due to time. But most people, only see what they're prepared to see. And as leaders, we are sometimes put in a position to communicate our vision and to get everyone to see what we see, and that's very, very difficult. But when I ask the question, when people look at this logo, I ask, what is the very first thing that you see? And the number one question I get is ROI. A response that I get is ROI. And in business, we have a tendency to see ROI too. But if you look closer, you can see something a little bit more clearly, which is 3 bars, which represents the E. So for the ones who now see ROE over ROI, it's the start of this process. And the trick is to see ROE first and not ROI. And as an example, there are many things that we see, and once we see them, we can't unsee them. And it's exciting to share them with people because then they kind of share in that teachable moment. For example, Amazon.com, there's an arrow, clearly, as everyone sees, but the arrow is pointing from what to what? A to Z. And Amazon has everything from A to Z. So once we see this, again, we can't necessarily unsee it. So same thing here, speaking of arrows, FedEx. FedEx, if you haven't noticed, there's an arrow in FedEx. Does everybody see it? Yes? No? Yes? There's the arrow in FedEx, okay? Maybe we can use visual cues here instead of verbal. So there's the arrow in FedEx. And this is pretty common, right? A lot of people have seen the arrow in FedEx. But what's interesting when they pitched this logo to the CEO of FedEx and his leadership team, the CEO saw this immediately. He immediately looked at this logo as it was presented by the ad agency and said, there's the arrow. And it's pretty fascinating in this example that the leader saw something that nobody else on the leadership team saw. Until he pointed it out. And from that perspective, I think that's what we live with every single day, trying to demonstrate and explain what our visions are of the company, and more importantly, making sure we try to get everybody on board through the process. So this is the slide I'm excited to share with you. And I should say that there's 2 disclaimers before I go through this. And these 2 responses are perfectly normal, so don't let them bother you too much. But the 2 responses, number 1, is you will self-assess. You'll start assessing yourself. This is how I think. This is how I communicate. But then also you will start assessing those around you, your employees, coworkers, peers, mentor groups, etc. And from that perspective, it's perfectly normal. But what I'd ask you to do is don't do that right now. Okay, there's lots of time to reflect on this, and we'll do that later. But for the next maybe 7 minutes, let's just absorb this information and maybe start to see things a little bit differently too. What few people realize is there are 3 distinct roles that comprise any successful organization, and the way I describe those roles are simply way 1, way 2, and way 3. No more complicated than that. And the way I describe a way 1 thought process is the vision. That's the vision seat. And the way 2 is strategy, and the way 3 is tactics. what's interesting about the next few minutes is I'm not going to tell you anything that you don't already know. I'm just going to put, let's just say, a creative spin on reality of things that we already know. But hopefully I can connect some dots, not just for you guys as leaders, but how I can help you then connect the dots for the people that are following you on this vision, on this leadership journey. So the way I see this is the way one is setting the business objectives of the organization. And an objective, defined by ROE is not a goal. It's very, an objective is a number and a time. So what I would challenge you is to ask you, what are your top 5 business objectives for your organization? And again, an objective being a number and a time, we all have these things, called financial business objectives, where we want to increase sales by 10% by 12/31 of this year. But what are some of the other business objectives that you've set, such as client objectives, or internal business process objectives, or culture objectives, as we are all involved in this Small Giants organization and are looking to do? And more importantly, are your strategic plans aligned to those business objectives? And lastly, all the tactics that are being performed in our businesses every single day, are they aligned to the strategic plans that are ultimately aligned to those 5 core business objectives? And in my experience in running my company, when I ask the question, what are you doing? Then I need to know that they know that this tactic is aligned to the business objectives that we've set for the company. So another way of kind of putting this in perspective and connecting the dots is the idea, plan, action. And what I say is the 20th century thinking is an idea without action. We've all heard this. An idea without action is a pipe dream. But in research and in writing the book, what I've found that has never been said before is an idea without a plan is a pipe dream. And the Small Business Administration will tell you that businesses don't fail due to lack of ideas or to the lack of action. We're all working really, really hard on our businesses. They fail due to the lack of planning. They fail due to the lack of qualified way to thinking that should be going on in our companies. And we as entrepreneurs, we as the passion drivers of our company, feel that we can sit in that way to seat and perform way to roles, which is creating plans, strategic plans on top of that, when in fact we're sometimes not the best to do that. The other thing I like to talk about in kind of connecting these dots together is the why, how, what. We're asking these questions every day, and we can't necessarily disagree with an answer if we don't ask the right question. So from this perspective, when I ask somebody, what are you doing? Or somebody asks me, how are we going to do this? I instantly translate the what question to the tactic and the how question to the plan. And most importantly, the why question. So what we say around here is building our core values to know why you're doing what you're doing. Again, why you're doing what you're doing. Is the tactic aligned to the business objective? Is the action aligned to the plan that's aligned to the idea? So from that perspective, it starts to put kind of things in perspective. And what I find in my conversations with the people around here, to include my clients, by simply asking the why, how, what question a few different times in a meeting, in an engagement, you can really get a lot of information back from people. Because if it's your VP of operations asking you how questions, and they're responsible for creating a strategy aligned to your business objective, there's a teachable moment in there to help mentor them to be a stronger way to thinker. And of course, we're all communicating together every day. So connecting the arrows is critical to make sure that we're communicating in the right way. So if somebody asks me a what question, I go into way to mindset and start explaining the strategy. I don't stay at 52,000 feet where I like to live and start overwhelming them with why responses, idea responses, business objective responses. Because if I do, and they don't know the how, I'm just going to create more confusion and more stress than is what is necessary. And then lastly, and most importantly, each one of these ways have 2 desired results. And I find this incredibly helpful in the sales process. and not just sales to my prospects and my clients, but sales to my employees as well, to prospective employees in the employee retention and recruiting process. The way one thinker, the way one mindset has two desired results. Those two desired results are people development and business results. And if we open up that box, people development under the way one, we'll find two things: mentorship and leadership. And I'm pushing time, so I'm going to go over to the people development box under the way two. Again, what we'll find is mentorship, but management. Way ones lead, way twos manage. Way ones lead smaller teams of people than way twos. So the distinction between leadership and management, according to ROE, is the difference between the way one and the way two thinker. So if I'm managing a group as a way two, if I'm managing a group of vision coordinators, the ones who are on the front lines and doing the work, it's really critical that I'm not micromanaging them, as we hear all the time, but I'm micro-mentoring them. And you'll see some of this information on the blog on my website. But by micro-mentoring them, I'm going to increase their personal development. And by doing so, their tactical results will be more effective. The strategic results, the plans that I've created to accomplish my business objectives, will be stronger, and hence then I'll get my business results that I'm looking for. So as you can see, there's a feedback loop here from mentoring and leader, mentoring and management, personal development, back to tactical, strategic, and business results. So when I say that ROE powers ROI, by focusing on the people first, the people development and the personal development first, I'm ultimately going to get the business results that I'm looking for. And lastly, and very quickly, about mentorship. These are books that have been published that Google has digitized, over 5 million books since 1900. Management has accelerated. Leadership is becoming, pretty popular, of course, in the business world. But mentorship is getting a lift. And what's interesting about using this is if you look at 1975, mentorship is getting a really big lift in business literature. And that's pretty exciting because, again, it goes back into supporting what the ROE methodology is all about by building employee engagement through mentorship. That was about 30 seconds over, I think, but there you have it.
It's a very basic question. You may have said it, Mike, but I missed it. What is ROE? Return on engagement?
Actually, ROE is return on energy.
Energy. Okay.
Yeah, and what I say is ROI is comprised of three things: time, effort, and money. In order for us to get ROI out, we don't have any more time, and our competitors sometimes have more money or less money. That's not an indication of success, I believe. It's the effort or the energy that we put into our businesses and how we align that effort to get a higher ROI in our business.
Hey, Mike, great job on your thoughts. Do you follow any sort of intentional plan when it comes to mentoring with your team?
We do actually, and the way we do it is we just kind of bake it in, if you will, into everything that we do. From our core values that we start our meetings with 2 or more employees, to the core values hanging on the wall and the descriptions down below, to job descriptions on demonstrating what the role is in the organization and how that role from a tactical and a strategic perspective impacts the business objectives. So it's a constant conversation that we're having. It's not necessarily a line item that we go through, but we're always talking about the why, how, what, idea, plan, action, objective, strategy, and tactics. And you hear the way 1, way 2, way 3 word used a lot around the office, which is another way to anchor it back to mentoring.
Cool, thank you.
The floor is open for questions or just a conversation.
Yeah, I got a question for Mike. Just for your own company, what is your own why, how, and what? How would you summarize that?
Yeah, one thing I say about vision or the why, if you will, I think one of the greatest examples of why is Starbucks. What is Starbucks' why? Starbucks' why is not community. It's to become that third place, the place between your work and your home. And when you walk into work and you walk into home, what's generally the first thing you hear? Your name. Hence, the tactic of writing a name on a Starbucks cup the tactic aligned to the strategy, aligned to the why to become the third place. So, to answer that question here at Mojo Media Labs, I'm constantly struggling with identifying our why and what that true why really is. I don't want it to be just something we write down on paper. And I struggle with it not being a strategy like increasing, bottom line growth for our clients. It's really something bigger than that. And, we always look for ways to refine that internally and communicate that out as a brand message to our clients. But we have, on the strategic planning side, we have 14 strategic objectives that we follow for 2014. Each one of those 14 strategic objectives is aligned to our business objectives, and they're all categorized into areas such as finance, as I mentioned earlier, client, internal business process, and culture. So when somebody is doing a tactic and they're getting perhaps frustrated, or they have a sense of accomplishment, then we tie it through the strategic objective and then ultimately to the business objective too.
Thanks.
This is actually for Kathy and or Adam. With your emergence as Red Caffeine in the past year, how has kind of this concept of identifying your why and your how and moving forward developed for you? Where do you feel like you're at in this process?
Adam,
Not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
What's that, Kathy?
do you want me to take this question?
Sure. Or you can throw me under the bus and I'll do it. Doesn't matter.
Sure. No, I'll take it. Well, I think it started with really working kind of throughout this process before we even had the business split. So we really started talking about who we wanted to be moving forward. And it's interesting because I read your book last summer after Small Giants Conference. Adam's read your book as well. And I'm kind of, it's been a while since I revisited the ROE methodology, and I'm kind of pleased to say that we're moving in a great direction. We've just recently really started doing more, lining up things that we're doing for employee and business growth to a strategy, an operational and organizational goals and strategies. So it kind of felt good to see, as you unveiled the methodology, I felt like, wow, I'm not messing this up too bad. But I think, it was really starting from scratch and really revisiting why we did what we did. We kind of went out of order and established the core values first and then backtracked to the why, and then, really have just been trying to kind of have regular pulse checks and keep everybody on the same page. And we went to open management last year at the very beginning and really kicked it into high gear in the first part of this year. So that's been very interesting. So I don't want to keep going, but I'd say we're still a work in progress for sure, but I think we've made some really great incremental changes since the movement was launched.
And I think that's really great. I like where you started with the core values. I just did a workshop with a bunch of eye care professionals, the way ones of the organization, if you will, and we actually started with the core values. Then we went on to the organizational chart, current state. We looked at the future state of the org chart. Do they want to sit in the 2 and the 3 role, or do they want to feel more powered or excited to sit in the way 1 role? So we can design the future state of our organizations around our personal passions as owners of these businesses. And that might change some core values. It might change our business objectives. And ultimately, it will change the way our organizational chart looks. So I don't think there's any one right or wrong way of doing it. But one thing that I say is that vision is indescribable, just like playing an instrument. It's impossible to describe sound. You have to actually play the instrument. And one of the ways to describe vision of our companies is to play the sound of our business. And the way we do that is through objectives and strategies and tactics and plans and ideas and and core values and purpose and mission. That's the box we're thinking inside of every day. Yet we consistently try to think outside this box, which then creates a lot more confusion and the lack of alignment that we're looking for in our employees.
So I did have one question. I thought this is what either you said in your presentation or it was part of the book. Is there certain times where you're the visionary and then other times where you're the strategist and other times maybe you're the tactical person? It seems like the team takes on different roles depending on the type of effort we're making, and I think sometimes I'm the visionary, but a lot of times I'm in the strategy as well.
The old hybrid roles, absolutely. And I'd love to be able to take you through the latter part of this presentation because that's one of the things we talk about. For example, when I was talking to the eye doctors, as you can imagine, the way 3 mindset is, whether it's with a spreadsheet or performing an eye exam, it's really the tactics. It's the areas of SME is what we say. So in the area of professional services, eye doctor, consulting firms, etc., in many cases, we have to be that way 3, that subject matter expert. But at the same time, we have to pull ourselves away, go up to 52,000 feet and run our companies as well as leaders, as way 1 thinkers. So one of the biggest struggles for small businesses, and I believe the reason why businesses are designed to fail, is because of this hybrid approach. When you're forced to be a way 1, a way 2, and a way 3 thinker every single day, that's exhausting. And that's where ownership and business fatigue starts to set in. So, I'm effectively running 3 businesses. I'm not a 1, 2, or 3 in one of them. I've been able to find people to run that business very well in the 1, 2, 3 role. Now I'm sitting in the way 1 seat of Mojo Media Labs, but I've been able to find way 2, way 3 thinkers around me. And I don't have to go into the 2, 3 role anymore in Mojo. Now in ROE, the new venture, I find myself sitting in the 1 and the 3 role. But I know it, and I've hired a very, very competent for ROE, Return on Energy, ROE Inc. So the most important thing is not to not sit in those seats, but to know when you should or shouldn't be sitting in those seats. So when what I say is a way 1 cannot communicate with a way 3 unless they revert to way 2 thinking or communicate through a way 2 thinker. So from that perspective, if we try to communicate from 1 to 3 directly, then it starts to get confusing to people. So to your point exactly, there's what we call the way 1, way 2, way 3 hybrid. And if you're a 1-3 hybrid or a 2-3 hybrid, that's something at least to be cognizant of. I have this in imaginary apparatus on my desk, and I know when I should be in 1 mode, 2 mode, or way 3 thinking, i.e. tactic, strategy, or vision. And I'll tell you, I'm the best strategist in the world. I think we all would say we understand strategy, but I'm not. That's not my best and highest use. That's the day I go home and say it wasn't a great day because I had my way 2 hat on all day long. But I'm most passionate to sit in the way 1 seat and to be able to deliver what I'm doing now in ROE, which is my personal passion, which is a way 3 role, if you will, from the ROE perspective. So just having an understanding of how you should be thinking at any one time and then who you're communicating to and what state of mind they're in is very, very important.
Mike, does everybody in the organization fit into a way 1, way 2, way 3 thinker, or is that primarily on your management level? And second part of that is when you're looking to bring somebody into the organization, do you actively identify, how do you identify where they fit into that system of thinking during the interview process?
That's a great question. And I believe what I look for, and I talk to a lot of college students and in the interview process. And matter of fact, I'm doing a TV show next week on this exact same thing. I believe the interviewee, the person being interviewed, should interview the interviewer. And I can tell when I'm being interviewed in that relationship because they're asking why, how, what questions. Now, they can ask, what is my business objectives? As a company, Mike, you want to hire me for your organization. What are your business objectives, and are you on plan or not? And what role are you hiring me for? What's my role in the company, and how can I help you accomplish your strategic objectives? What are your strategic objectives for the organization? So from that perspective, it's very quick when you start thinking this way and observant to the ROE infographic as I described it. You'll start to hear the cadence of these questions and how people think. Because you can know very, very quickly, and we know this intrinsically, if somebody's trying to pull you into the weeds, and all they want to talk about is if it's red or blue, if it turns right or left, or they want to tell you how to make the clock, not the time, as we've heard before, or if somebody is in very big idea land and they just want to pitch all their ideas to you, but you're hiring them for a way 3 seat. So we can very quickly determine how people think intrinsically before we bring them on board. But lastly, what I'll say about that is it's critical for us to have the right person in the right seat. And the way I describe that is by right person, that they live our core values. And lastly, that they're in the right seat, meaning they feel comfortable in the 2 or 3 or the 1 role for that matter, because they're uniquely qualified to do the job.
Mike, can you talk a little bit about the micro-mentoring aspect?
Sure.
What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, we all know what micromanagement is, right? And I know none of us here do that. That would be that's crazy. None of us do micromanagement. That's the other people. I get it. But clearly, what I call a micromanager is a way 3 thinker sitting in a way 2 seat. Okay. So if you are in a management position responsible for managing more people than just yourself, you're a manager. And from that perspective, if you were sitting in that way 3 seat, you were doing the work, you were the subject matter expert at one point, it's very, very difficult to not micromanage. But a qualified way 2 thinker sitting in a way 2 seat, who should be writing the plans, managing the people doing the work, not doing the work. So that kind of defines micromanagement, a way 3 thinker and a way 2 seat. But if you're a qualified way 2 thinker sitting in that seat, I believe you're going to value mentorship more than you'll value micromanagement. And I promise if you have time to micromanage, you have time to mentor people. And what I say of the difference between management and mentorship is management is one to many. It's the hard side of the business. We can measure it. We know what the outcomes are. But on the mentorship side, that's 1-to-1. And what's being constricted every single day in our life? More than money. It's time. And as time's being constricted, we have less time to spend with people. Therefore, I think we resort more to management and not mentorship. Because again, mentorship is this 1-to-1 approach. What I have found is that if I start micro-mentoring people by explaining why they're doing what they're doing, in many cases, it may have nothing to do with our business. It has to do with how to get better personal development in their lives, better time management skills, getting them to understand where the company's going long term and where they fit into the bigger picture. And again, by the way, a bigger picture is the vision. The big picture is the strategy. We as way 1 thinkers, as leaders of our companies, never say, "Can you see the big picture?" We're too passionate, too energetic, too excited. We don't say big picture. We say bigger picture, which again is the why. So if I don't have my employees seeing the how, the big picture, they're never going to see the bigger picture or the vision. So mentorship comes in many different areas, but it's really a 1-on-1 approach, as Paul Spiegelman would say. It's really understanding what's going on in the lives of our employees and how we can impact them at levels that they never would expect us as employers to impact them.
Mike, as a company grows, do you see certain positions that outgrow the individual from a way 1, way 2, way 3 thinker where, I think I'm trying to think of the name where the team that got you there isn't necessarily the team that's going to take you further. Do you see that happening inside of these different roles for positions, and how do you deal with that? Do people evolve between potentially being, they start out as a way 3 thinker, and as the organization grows, they develop into a way 2, way 1 thinker?
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite questions. And how many companies do we know of where the founders, I should say successful companies who've been able to get to high level of success and maturity, the founders are the CEOs at that point in time? Rarely does that happen. Venture capital, private equity, angel investment will come in, they'll help companies get to the next level, and generally the founders exit the company because they don't have the same skill set to run a 10, 50, $100 million company that they did in the startup phase. So in my book, I talk about Dr. Adesius' life cycle of a business.
Oh, Mike, I think we lost
The team that got you to $1 million or to $10 million may not be the team to get you to 20, 30, or 50 million. I don't know where I might have fallen off, but the team that got you to $1 million may not be the team to get you to $100 million or even $10 million for that matter. We know it's different to run a business at 10 than over 1 million. And I would also challenge to say that our leadership skills as individuals may not allow us to get our company to the next level. That's why personal development is the fundamental element to return on energy. Because I think if you value personal development, back to the other question, we'll value mentorship. And more importantly, some people are not mentorable because they don't necessarily value personal development. So when I'm mentoring somebody, I first look for the key element if they value personal development. So you can see the genius in some of the business leaders of our time. Michael Dell, he started the business in his dorm room, and he came back as CEO not too long ago, and stock prices returned. Bill Gates, he's a perfect way 3, but he's also a great way 1. So some of these leaders that we see, Steve Jobs, he started the company, but yet he ran it at a very high level. And there's not a lot of people who have the ability to start a company, be the founders, the ideation, the passion behind the startup phase, and then run it at a very, very high level as well without a huge amount of personal development and mentoring. So yeah, sometimes the team has to be turned over. As I take one of Paul's leadership principles is weed the garden, in order to basically get your company to the next level, because maybe your company went to the next level and that you have skill sets set at a few levels below.
Outside of, I think a majority of the folks that are on this call are the founders of their companies or came on at very early stages, and they're all growing companies very clearly. We've talked about ROE and ROI, we've talked about the right person on the bus, but speaking on personal development, are there any particular texts or places that you think people should be looking for information, besides your book, clearly, that people should be looking for information, for insights, for best practices, for inspiration from other leaders? What are resources for people to really grasp a hold of that so they can determine where they fall in the spectrum and how they can develop?
Sure. Again, to go back to Paul asks me all the time, what's the difference between, Small Giants and the Entrepreneur Organization, if anyone's familiar with EO. And what I say is Small Giants makes all my other stuff work better. Just like what I say is ROE is not to displace anything that you guys got going on, any EOS with traction or whatever else that you're learning about and currently reading. What I say is ROE is designed to make all those other tools work better. But I think there's a double-edged sword between that. And the reason why I say that is because, there's two things that's going to impact us now and in the future. And it's going to be the people we meet and the things that we read, essentially. And we as way 1 thinkers, we as leaders of our companies are consuming information so fast. We're going to hear people speak. You guys are on here today. You're reading books that are on your nightstands right now. And that's going to impact you in the future. But the double-edged sword to that is taking those ideas into the company the next day. We go to a trade show, we go to an event, we listen to a great speaker. We want to come back the next day into our companies and implement those things right away. Again, that's going from idea to action so fast. And people can't, in the office sometimes, can perform and respond to that same rate. And that's why I talk about inside and outside the box ideas and making sure that anything we bring back into the companies that we've learned is not disrupting anything that's currently going on in the company. But EO for me, Entrepreneur Organization, eonetwork.org, I always pitch Small Giants and everywhere I talk because I think it's so valuable to tie back to the core values. And I've got several blogs and people that I follow and listen to.
So, Mike, you made a specific point there about the CEO going off, gathering information and insights, coming back and essentially dropping it on top of the organization in order to try and implement, and the damage that it can do or the success that it can cause. I know that this is specifically that's something that Kathy and Adam, you guys have collaborated on when you're taking in new information, because Adam plays specifically a strong implementation role in new learnings and things that are going on. How do you guys do that effectively in your organization where Kathy and Adam, you go off and learn something and then it comes back in, and Adam, you're really driving a lot of that implementation?
Sorry, I had to unmute there. I think to tie it a little bit back to what Mike was saying earlier, from when I first read the book following Kathy, it really helped me to realize who was playing what role as far as which way we were thinking. And, Kathy obviously founded the company, 10 years ago. And it's really helped me to realize what way I'm a way two, clearly here. Kathy's the way one. And delineating what hat we're wearing when we're, whether we come back from a Small Giants event or, one of us reads a book or whatever, discussing it, figuring out what our vision is. And not that I don't have input into that, but it's really Kathy driving the vision, and then me figuring out how do we implement that through the rest of the organization and get everybody else bought in.
Great. Thank you. Kathy, anything else to add to that?
Well, yeah, I think it's one of the things I think that we've done pretty well is not fear failing, and maybe it's just me that doesn't fear failing, but I really have tried not to come back from anything and do like a whole bunch of new things. I really try to think about what we're going to do, but in the same respect, I've tried to have us get some things underway. As long as we're regularly communicating about how we're doing, where we're at in the process, is it working, is it not working, and then react to those things, I think that's been super helpful. Because I feel like, like, for instance, the Great Game, I think there was a lot of fear around that in the very beginning. And but we really just pulled the trigger anyways, and we're learning. We're still really learning, and we have aspirations to be really great at it, but we didn't expect that this year, so we just knew it was going to be a learning process, and we just keep working at it and refining it. And I think, as long as I kind of say this is what I think we should be doing, and Adam helps the team kind of get in line to, our vision. It just seems to be working really well. But in the same respect, if something's not working, I think we're all pretty good about saying it's just not working. Let's either fix it or eliminate it or things like that. So,
about how long do you? Oh, sorry, Mike.
I was just going to say, I really congratulate you guys. And when a way one's working with a qualified way two thinker, and again, these aren't labels. Your titles aren't way one, way two. It's the way we naturally think and feel more passionate about thinking. When a way one can deal with a qualified way two thinker, magic happens, and it's pretty exciting to see that when it happens.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, or the biggest revelation of late, and I don't know why I'm so slow, but I just didn't realize that everybody didn't think like me. And I have a lot, we're a highly creative organization, so I do have a lot of visionary, creative people on the team, and so it's very easy for me to communicate with those people, and it's learning that and knowing the value of people that don't think like that, and how to, this is still very challenging to me, but I think this is really a revelation to me that they think differently, and I need to communicate differently, and that's really that I've been really trying to work out a little bit.
And I think what gets overwhelming as business owners is we have all these thinking assessments we can do. We can do DISC, we can do all these profiling assessments, and we do DISC on everybody here too, but it's complicated and it's difficult. We run the assessment once, we put it in a folder, and we really don't address it again. But way 1, way 2, way 3 is real. I'm running a company on it. We manage our clients this way, and it's a very, very quick way to assess how somebody's thinking, and not just long term, hence not the label, but how they're thinking at that particular moment. When my fear factor goes up in my company, and they know this, I dive right into the tactics. I get right into the weeds, and I want to start doing stuff. And they're very quick to say, we're on plan. Don't worry, back out. So when my fear factor, or I just learned something new, I want to fly in and get into the details. They know from my view that my fear factor is going up. And as a result of that, it's a way to disagree without being disagreeable, to have me back out and get back into that way 1 mindset, not swoop into the way 3 mindset.
Got a couple of quick questions. Firstly, this is fantastic timing. I'm interviewing for Director of Operations tomorrow and next week. I'm a type 1 thinker. I've got a very strong why statement, got our values in place. I know how to get into the weeds and get stuff done, but I'm looking for this type 2 person and interviewing tomorrow. So a couple of quick questions. Can I have a copy of these slides to show the potential candidates tomorrow? And then question for Kathy, how did you find Adam? And a question for Mike, any specific recommendations of what I can be asking to identify if this person really is a natural type 2 thinker, which I know our organization needs right now?
Ladies first.
Adam found me.
That's the best. That was exactly going to be my answer. Yes, great. And for me, I just hired a way 2 in Mojo, a way 2 thinker, let me just say a qualified way 2 thinker in Mojo Media Labs, and it was one of the most exciting days to find that person, and they found us. And I think that going back to small giants, culture is marketable, core values is marketable, ROE is marketable. I mean, this is very, very good stuff. And when you do that and you find a way to communicate and describe that from your website, for example, or your job placement ads or whatever else, people see that and they want to work for great companies, and people will find you. And when that happens and they're qualified, wow, that's pretty exciting. But the questions I would ask simply are those why, how, what questions, and not the questions I believe that would be, how have you failed in the past? I mean, it's like, what strategic plans have you designed around this same idea of our business? And where did you fail in those plans and why? Did you fail because you did the work, you were a micromanager, or did you fail because you didn't have qualified people sitting in the way 3 role because you didn't mentor and personally develop them? Or how have you personally developed and mentored people in the past? How do you resist micromanaging? What are you currently reading? That's a clear indication of if you value personal development, those kind of things. And the other thing I would caution on is when we're looking for a way 2 thinker and they come in with a whole bunch of ideas, I actually had somebody come in and we hired them. This is through the ROE process many years ago, and they were just full of ideas, and I could never bounce an idea off of them. Brainstorming is when you come to the table with one idea and leave with 15 ideas and no plan. But I don't mind brainstorming, but I need to be able to bounce ideas off my way 2, meaning that I need to be able to have vetted an idea somewhere, go to my way 2 thinker and bounce an idea and see if they can write a plan and put together the right resources to execute that plan. So from that perspective, if they start brainstorming with me immediately, they're more of a way 1 thinker, and I don't know if I can get them to rein them into the way 2 role very well.
Fantastic advice. Thank you.
I'd like to weigh in on this if I could. Is that okay, Glenn?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim, and then I've got a quick question for Adam, and then we'll wrap things up.
Okay. Mike, I've not read your book, so I don't fully grasp, the difference between way one, way two thinkers. I can only speculate at this point. But, Paul, when we hire as a company, we hire for culture first and skills second. And, and I know that the strategic thinking is really important, but I think if we overlook the culture, and I apologize if I'm stating the obvious, but if we overlook the culture, we could be bringing somebody in with baggage that may be a superstar otherwise, but could cause injury to the organization. Just my thought.
Real quick,
Okay, thanks.
Adam, how'd you find Kathy?
Long story short, I knew what type of role I was looking for. And long story short is I applied way too thinking to find the job I wanted. I lived in the town I lived in, and I said I want to work in an agency and, be involved in strategy, draw a circle on the map, and, worked my network to find agencies around through people that I knew at the target agencies, and connected the dots with Kathy, told her I wanted to have coffee, and the rest was history.
Real quick, I'll say that's the genius of the way two thinker. You never ask a way one out for lunch. You always ask them out for coffee. Because the way one has more time than, the way one has more money than time, and the way three has more time than money. So take the way threes to lunch and dinner, but always take way ones to coffee. That you'll always get them that way. That's great.
Okay, well that's it for this one. Check out more Fishbowls exclusively for the Small Giants community at smallgiants.org.